So here's going to be my movie review for Napoleon. I was excited about this movie. I had my questionable suspicions because it was Ridley Scott. And I've said it before, I think he's fallen off. And I think this movie exemplifies that. This movie was not a biopic, it was a hit piece on Napoleon. So let's go over my thoughts on the movie. We're going to break this down into segments because it was a 2.5 hour movie. I do think the movie started off phenomenally. It started off with the French Revolution, the Queen being beheaded, Napoleon slowly rising up the ranks, to the Siege of Toulon, where we see our first combat sequence. And I thought it did a very good job. It didn't focus on the troops. It was kind of an overview. You kind of saw Napoleon's perspective, what he was doing during that. So the combat in this sequence was actually pretty decent. Now, there's some minor historical details, whatever, it's a movie. I'll give them a little bit of leeway. But throughout the movie, the combat scenes get worse and worse and worse. And throughout the entire 2.5 movie, you maybe get 30 or 45 minutes of actual combat from what he's done. And I do believe they only did 4 or 5 battle scenes out of the, I believe, 60 or 70 that happened in his reign as emperor. Yeah, that's not a biopic. But digressing, let's keep going. So after the Siege of Toulon, he goes back to France. They introduce Josephine, kind of how that actually worked. But this is where the movie decides to take some weird route. And after this, everything's just terrible. So throughout the next, well, probably hour, it was essentially all about Napoleon taking power, how Josephine's encouraging him to do so, and how she is responsible for his rise to emperor status. And, if it was just, her encouraging him, I would be like, okay, maybe she was. That's more than likely. Yes, take the power, become emperor. I want to be fucking queen. Cool. Every kind of woman's dream. I would give him that, but that's not what they did. They made him a beta simp who was getting cucked by Josephine throughout the rest of the entire movie. There was a gratuitous amount of scenes where she belittles him and he whimpers like a dog, begging her for sex. They gloss over the fact that she had 2 kids prior to them meeting. They gloss over the fact that he adopted them. They gloss over the fact that when he became emperor, he made sure that the most important woman in his life was included in the painting of his coronation, his mother, and instead opted to make him a whimpering simp for Josephine for the rest of the movie. Now, of course, all this is going on. We get the, I'm not even sure what battle it was because it was so vague and over so fast, you couldn't tell what this was. All you could tell was it was at the pyramids. And I believe there were 6 or 7 battles in Egypt. So this could have been any one of them. But those are glossed over. None of that matters. None of, him conquering all of Egypt and bringing that into his empire. That doesn't matter. What does matter is that one of his marshals decides to tell him that they're making fun of him in France because Josephine is cheating on him. So he leaves his army in Egypt and flees back to France. Which, I do believe that's recorded, so yeah, I'll give him that. But when he gets back there, What does he do? He whimpers like a dog and begs for her. Yeah. So, like, again, this sets the tone for the rest of the movie. So, of course, while he's there, they pretty much behead Robespierre. He makes his political power moves, does the whole thing. And while he's making all these power moves, Josephine is sitting him down on a couch, telling him he is nothing without her and how he needs her to become emperor. You know, none of his own accord. Which didn't happen like that. Sorry, this is just a fucking hit piece on Napoleon. Strong undertones of females leading the fucking world. But anyway, let's keep going. So he gets his rise to power. You don't see any more battles until his invasion of Russia. So the entire thing, for the next hour and a half, is him getting cucked by Josephine because she's screwing other dudes. They completely ignore the fact that he had picked up many mistresses along the way. They do touch on, and I say touch, on her not being able to get pregnant. So he divorces her. That does actually happen. He marries another woman. She has kids with him. They kind of just gloss over that. It's like maybe 15 seconds of this movie. And he makes numerous trips while he's engaged in combat, conquering all of fucking Europe, bringing it to its heels. That's all just glossed over. And he just keeps going back to Josephine. They ignore the fact that he had 6 of his own children, plus the 2 adopted. You know, the only thing, the adopted kids don't matter at this point, even though one of them becomes one of his army's, I forget a specific rank. I don't think he ever made it to Marshal. But anyway, they completely ignore that he adopted the kids, cared for them, raised them, and the son that he adopted served in the army. That doesn't matter. The only thing that matters in this movie is Josephine. This is not a biopic about Napoleon. It's a hit piece on Napoleon about Josephine. But the movie goes on. They go over the invasion into Russia, which I understood. I don't think anybody who doesn't know the history will have no idea what the hell's going on. Like how they described Napoleon's push to Moscow as a baggage train getting raided by Russian Cossacks, which happened. That's accurate. But that was maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes. It was over fast. They don't explain what that is. They don't explain that he made a transport line of horses and people from essentially what is Germany today all the way to Moscow. They gloss over that. So anybody who doesn't know, I would assume probably thinks, oh, he was just leading troops in and they got raided the entire time, when in all actuality, he fought multiple battles all across Russia and defeated them. And the real turning point, which they gloss over in a few-minute battle scene, was Borodino. And Borodino is where Napoleon lost so many troops that maintaining his defense in Russia was not tenable. Russia abandoned Moscow, which they depicted fairly well. He pretty much rolls into Moscow and nobody's there. That they all fled. So that part was good. They kind of touched on it for a minute of how they burned Moscow to not give it to Napoleon. But they didn't give any depth on what actually happened and why they did that or who did it. They just say the Russians burned Moscow so Napoleon couldn't have it. But that was a whole catastrophe in itself in the history books. There was so much going on there that they could have even spent 10 or 15 minutes on what they did. Then they kind of immediately jump back to Napoleon in exile. which there was so much that happened between when he got to Moscow and when he got exiled. Like, so many battles. And the 26 marshals he had under him leading their fucking armies, they didn't go over any of them. And some of them were, I would say, more badass than Napoleon. Maybe not as, we'll say, tactical as Napoleon, but they were fucking badasses. Like, where is Ney? The dude who suffered 20 or 30 different wounds in different battles and still returned to the front line across his entire career for Napoleon to help lead him to victories. No, you get nothing from him. Like, it's just, there's so much they gloss over to make this about how much Napoleon is a beta cuck simp to Josephine, when in all reality, once he filed for divorce, he practically never talked to her again. Like, he wrote his private letters how he still loved her, but he knew she was a terrible person and he could never be with her and she wouldn't give him an heir. But no, the entire thing is he keeps writing her letters, ignoring everybody else. Nobody else matters. Nobody else exists because they don't say it in the movie. They kind of, when he goes back to France, they make it this 10-15 minute scene. And it's kind of him. He just walks up to troops and says, "I am your emperor." And he had a lot of quotes that were documented where he was like, "Let anybody who denies me being their emperor, shoot me dead now," type deal. And they don't do it. That's how he rebuilds an army almost instantly. But they gloss over that and, he's just magically back. It's cool. And shortly after that, like the next 10 or 15 minutes, is going back to Josephine, how she's sick in bed with pneumonia, which did happen. and then kind of jumps back to Napoleon going to visit Josephine to find out she's dead from his adopted kid, which didn't happen that way. He learned it in a newspaper, like almost immediately. So not quite how it happened. I think they could have done better if he had actually read it in a newspaper and then, yeah, okay, anyway. Moving on. So it pretty much immediately jumps into the Battle of Waterloo, only they don't really show you the Battle of Waterloo. They do the same weird thing where they show Napoleon and then they just have his troops getting slaughtered, which is every battle. Every battle is done like this. They don't show you the battle. They show you Napoleon and then they say troops slaughtered. That's pretty much it. But anyway, he loses the Battle of Waterloo. They exile him again. And then it's a quick, I want to say 2 or 3 minute scene of him dying in permanent exile. Like, this movie frustrated me so much. And I'm just kind of touching on the history and how dirty they did Napoleon in this movie, because I could rant for hours on everything he did that they skipped in favor of making him Josephine's cuck simp husband. The entire movie, I'm sitting there in the theaters, like wanting to strangle the projector guy because this is so bad. Like, I'm giving it a 1 star because at least it exists. That's my rating to get a 1 star movie. 1 out of 5 because it exists. But yet I cannot recommend this movie at all. It is nothing but a political hit piece on Napoleon saying he was terrible. Oh, I almost forgot. The end scene, the very final scene, is the death tally for Napoleon on how many people died because of Napoleon. It's not that this man had a meteoric rise to power, brought Europe to its fucking knees, had Russia running from him and evading him, how it required multiple countries to try and raise the biggest armies they can to fight against him because they couldn't touch him. And they got rid of all of that to make him simp for Josephine and literally whimper in her presence to beg for a crumb of vagina. That's not an exaggeration. Multiple times in this movie, they had him whimpering like a dog, begging for sex. Like, this movie is terrible. It is absolutely terrible. I would not recommend anybody ever see this movie, not even for free. It does Napoleon zero justice. It is it is honestly, it's woke to its core. It's all about strong women and how men must submit and how women have to lead men and tell them what to do. That really is the undertone of this entire movie. And I would love to go over all of Napoleon's battles, but this isn't a history channel. It is an entertainment channel. So I'm going to leave it at that. But guys, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this one out. And I'm looking forward to do some more movie reviews. But until the next one, guys, be easy like sleazy.